Hot prospect Jimmy Flick has retired from the UFC and MMA. At Freestyle Cage Fighting event, Flick took to the cage to say that the UFC wasn't his dream anymore, and he would be stepping away from MMA at the age of 30, saying he's going to pursue family life as well as a lot of other things. Had a lot of quotes in here, did an interview with Mike Heck over at MMA Fighting where he broke down the decision, why he decided to make that call in his career, despite having that fantastic performance over Cody Durden, in his last fight. Matt, what do you think of all this?
Man, so I don't want to like get too giddy over this sort of angle that Jimmy Flick has thrown out there, because we talk about all the time fighters need to unionize, right? We are all in agreement here with that notion, that it should have happened a few years ago, that these guys need to all get on the same page, collectively bargain for their interests, and they just do not do it. Fighters are very selfish. Fighters that are doing this full time need every paycheck that they can get. So they can't afford to collectively sit out together for any period of time, because most of these fighters, the guys that are the undercard, early prelim guys, they need checks. So what happens is the organizations continue to, keep the lion's shares of the profit. UFC is paying out, 21% of their revenue to their fighters, whereas other major organizations are paying around 50, NFL, MLB. So there's a pay discrepancy there, and these guys need to eventually, hopefully at some point in the future, come together and form a union. So what Jimmy Flick is talking about here, especially in this interview, are those sort of things. Hey, there is no 401k, there is no fallback plan. If I go out there and get hurt, my career's over tomorrow, I'm screwed, sort of thing, right? So I love that he is that aware. We've seen fighters be aware of this in the past. However, we've seen those fighters that have been vocal about it also be very quick to shut up when the UFC shows up with a new contract with a few more dollars on the line. So I'm glad to see, it's refreshing to see someone speak on it and actually follow through with action. So I wish other fighters that are still out there doing their thing, I'm not saying don't go get paid, don't take care of your family or anything like that, but pay attention, man. This guy actually stood by his beliefs, and he's actually acting on it. And he was scheduled for a fight. He was supposed to fight Davidson Figueiredo's brother, here in May, in a few weeks, actually. So to step away from that fight, from that paycheck, for his beliefs, and say, I'm going to focus on my family. I'm going to focus on things that are going to really get me where I need to get, what's best for my health, all those sorts of things. I love it. And I can do nothing but support this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a super admirable thing indeed. And I haven't watched the full interview, but like from what I have seen, it seems like very hard to disagree with everything he's bringing up. And it also sounded like, a little bit of a unique case with him, where he was saying how he'd been thinking about it for, a couple fights ago, right? I don't remember which one he said he was considering, like retiring before that fight or after, whichever one it was earlier. But this has been a thing that's been on his mind for a long time, how he's been, aware of the realities of MMA for longer than it wasn't just a brand new thing, right? It just didn't come up mid fight camp right now where he's like, oh yeah, I don't know how far I can really go in this, in terms of, making a big splash and becoming a, bazillionaire, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, it's definitely very refreshing. It's very good to see. And it just makes you hopeful that maybe more people will start to open their eyes and maybe care a little bit more about this kind of thing. But as Jimmy mentions, and I know you love this quote too, Matt, but he said, what was it? Fighters are too stupid to get together and kind of agree on this kind of thing. And that's just the sad reality, is that it is not a team sport. And that's why nobody's willing to work together. You got to look out for yourself. So they'll take whatever is in their best interest at whatever the time may be. Unless you're Jimmy Flick, who is looking at just the overall bigger picture and worrying about more than himself. His family was a big part of this decision, and why he is making it. So yeah, I just hope ultimately that he's right. It's probably not going to lead to much, but hopefully maybe there'll be a couple other people and some people taking notice and being like, he does have a really good point.
Tell you, the first thought I have about all of this is what MMA retirements tend to be. And they tend to be just breaks between training camps. Man, I hope this is a real retirement. I certainly hope this is something that he sticks with, because the principle behind this makes all the sense in the world. And quite frankly, I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. There is a certain level of glamorization, that's the proper word to use here in this moment, that goes into prize fighting, that people who don't do it, or fans of it, they hold the fighters onto a pedestal. And it makes sense. It is, you're in tip-top shape. You get to stand on the scale, flexing, showing all your muscles in your jaws. And, you hear about these huge paydays, at least according to what our regular salaries are for one night's of work. But man, there's so much more that goes into it. There are so many sacrifices. There's so many nicks and bruises and injuries and, family events that are missed out on, just eating meals that you want to eat when you want to eat it. There's so many different things that we take for granted every day in our regular lives that fighters have to be cognizant of, and the fighters will have to sacrifice. And I think this part of this interview, I think, is very important too. He said, we told Mike Heck that he told his coach that he wasn't going to come to the gym that day, and he was thinking like, hey, this might be it for me. I need a couple days to think it over, or whatever the case may be. And he gets a call later later that same afternoon saying that USADA's at the gym waiting for him because they want to test him. And then him realizing, yeah, this is really not the life for me. So you think about all the things that fighters have imposed on them, and USADA testing being one of them, just being just a small part of some of the sacrifices that go into being a UFC fighter. Like, do we remember the story of Uriah Faber at the hospital for the birth of his first child, and USADA's there to get this man a pee in a cup? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, when you think about that sort of thing and the control that the UFC has over the general lives of a fighter, beyond just the control that a fight career has over your life, and then you look at the financial returns. I mean, how crazy is it that this man is competing in the top organization in the world in a sport that has brought in billions upon billions of dollars? That organization alone sold for over $4 billion and is continually signing all sorts of hundreds of millions of dollars deals and endorsements and television rights and whatever the case may be. He's working a job making plexiglass for $40,000 a year. I find it very interesting too. Like, I have not been on Twitter today, aside from prepping to do these videos and doing my podcast earlier today. So I'm curious as to see what the fan response is to this, because this is the sort of thing that I imagine it right now. There is a dummy somewhere with the Twitter fingers going, saying, oh, he's ducking Figueiredo. Oh, he's afraid. The idea that Jimmy Flick would be afraid of another man that's in the same weight range of him is absolutely laughable, considering what the career that he just retired from. But as a family man, as a man who has more to his life than simply competing in mixed martial arts, I'm sure there's a lot to be afraid of, like your brain not being healthy and you not remembering your children's names, and not being able to afford the proper medical care that you need, or the proper care for them so that they can, go to college and they can live their lives because daddy's brains are mush now. That sounds like something to be afraid of. And that sounds like Jimmy Flick is smarter than your average, and thinking well beyond the immediacy of getting in that cage and getting what might feel like a big check at the moment. But at the end of the day, doesn't really amount to much when you think about the sacrifices that these men and women make. So, man, I hope his retirement sticks. And if it doesn't stick, I hope it's because suddenly fighters are getting paid a lot more and he decided now it's worth it. Now I can come back.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those situations where the interview itself felt like a guy who was trying to tell one story and kind of accidentally highlighted just, how ridiculous some of the things that are going on with the UFC are, right? I mean, one of my favorite quotes from it is when he says, that people don't really ask him, how much weight did you put back on after that fight? Can you do it? Is it mentally going to drain you? Nobody asks you those questions. Nobody ever does. And, that was talking about when the Durden fight originally dropped out, right? Because Durden got pink eye. And so he showed up, he trained, ends up getting paid his purse of 10 grand. And then he's going to have to put on more weight and then apparently go fight in 2 weeks again. And, is it going to mentally drain you? That's the type of psychological thing that can happen. And there's no guarantee there, right? You don't get paid your show win and you basically get a free paycheck. You have to then fight if anything happens because you're at the UFC's whim. Now, I think this retirement will stick because really the heart of what he was trying to say, it seemed like, was he didn't want to do this anymore. He mentions a really good part, about his father and his brother and kind of them struggling with addiction, and that he realized after his big win over Cody that, his father wasn't going to come back and corner him. And he realized he was fighting for the wrong reasons. And that kind of took the, dog out of him, so to speak. He even says it's kill or be killed. And I didn't have that in there. I don't want to get that trauma. I don't want to do that if that's what's going on. So I think that's really more of the basis of this is really his commitment to his family and trying to, be that loving husband and father and kind of maintain his body to, be there and do that, and also his own family issues. But he pointed out so many good things that fighters should recognize. Every fighter going into this right now should recognize, if you don't unionize, if you don't come together, you are left at the promotion's mercy. And you are also left with who knows what kind of ramifications of CTE. We got to remember that we are still early on in this sport, especially to the point where, we've got, stars, quote unquote, and more enough eyes and stars in the sport now that they haven't gotten old enough yet where we're seeing the real, ramifications of CTE. I think Gary Goodridge is the one example where you look at that story and how sad that is and things he's done and how horrific it is. But I would imagine in 20 years from now, there's going to be a lot of fighters that are going to end up like Gary. And that sucks. And it's like boxing. And it's going to be talked about more and more. But for Flick to have the wherewithal and, the ability to recognize, yes, this is not a job where I'm going to retire, get a pension plan, get taken care of forever. I'm going to get paid in and out, is very important. And he's right that fighters I don't know that they're too stupid to unionize necessarily, as much as, because I do think eventually it will happen. But he is right that right now, because of the way things are set up, there will always be other fighters ready to step in, right? This, just like if a plant, auto manufacturing plant unionized and they go on strike, scabs. Same type of deal here. And that's a lot of what Contender Series does, is continually get more and new guys who have been fighting on the regional circuit, grinding it out, getting paid almost nothing, sometimes paying to fight. Hey, you get 10 grand. That's a lot of money to those guys. And it's one of those things where until, everyone comes together and enough people come together and make enough noise about it, the union really won't happen or won't have an effect. And that's really... It's really insightful, and I'm proud of Flick for, realizing all this and doing the right thing to go do right by his family. I hope that more fighters follow suit.
Pat, something I want to add to that, kind of piggybacking off of what you said about some of the unionization ideas, like and fighters always like a scab, just somebody willing to just step in when the preferred person is deciding not to perform. I mean, it wasn't but a week or two ago that John Jones fighting for a big payday to fight Francis Ngannou, and then Derek Lewis turns right around and says, hey, It's like, well, I'll fight him for less. Like, and he might have said that in jest, but that sort of mentality is all, I mean, at the highest levels of the sport. Like, there's a reason why Dustin Poirier kind of shuns the idea of fighting Michael Chandler, because Chandler did essentially the same thing when Poirier was supposed to fight Tony Ferguson at some point. So trying to, it goes on at the highest level. So how do you think what happens at the lower levels? At 125, at a weight class that a lot of people, disregard and typically doesn't get the bonus money and doesn't get the main event placements or even the main card placements in a lot of cases. How do you think it goes on there? What do you think those guys' paychecks are like if the UFC is not willing to pony up for the greatest talent the sport has ever seen that is a proven draw in the pay-per-view world? So I mean, Jimmy Flick is thinking at a level that not many others are. Yeah.
This goes into the Derek Lewis thing that you talked about. Like you said, it's so frequent in MMA, and you think of, the other sports, NFL, for example, when a running back holds out, let's say like when Zeke Elliott held out a few years ago for, his paycheck or whatever, he wanted to get a specific number, or like Dak recently, right? Cowboys, I'm a Texas boy, sorry. The third string, the training squad guy, they didn't get on Twitter and were like, shit, I'll play for that much. I'll play for half of that. Why do you never see that? Well, one, obviously you're not that good of a running back, but two, you have organizations in place that discourage that sort of behavior, associations, right? Everything's collectively bargained. We're all on the same page here. Let's make sure we get our worth as players while we're here. Don't step on each other's toes. When quarterbacks are holding out, like I said, like with Dak, like you didn't see other quarterbacks saying, hey, I'll come play for the Cowboys. You didn't see other veterans come play. I'll come play for 20 mil. He wants 35. I'll come play for 20. Sign me. You don't see that happening because they have each other's backs, because they know if this guy gets what he's worth, that means when my contract time is, I'm going to get paid more. That's what the UFC fighters are missing on a large scale. They're missing that. And that's one of the things that they need to realize, whether it be paying attention to the Jimmy Flicks of the world, who, by the way, got a performance bonus in his first fight. And he still wasn't happy with what he got because, hey, when you get home and you pay all your taxes, you pay out your coaches and your gym and everything, it's not $50,000 you're getting. It's much less than that. That's one of the things I hope that finally clicks with these guys. I don't know how many times it has to be explained to them, because in a vacuum, when you talk to a fighter off to the side and you explain these things to them, you're like, yeah, I get it. But then at the end of the day, there's no movement that sticks. They'll start a movement here and there. And then, like I said, the UFC will come knocking. Hey, you want a title fight, GSP? At 185 against Michael Bisping? And then we never hear from GSP again. So it's frustrating, man. And I have so much respect for what these guys do. And I want to see them be compensated properly. Not just have the big three letters run the whole world, man. It's like you guys are what puts fans in the stands at the end of the day. People come to pay to see you compete. Stop letting the UFC run everything.
And I think it's also important to note something else in this. He says, and I'll just read the quote directly. The UFC did everything they said they were going to do in their contract. Everything I agreed to. There was nothing I wanted more. It's just the fact that once I got there and I experienced it, I realized it's only going to take more from me, and I'm still going to have to keep my job to take care of my family and my loved ones. So for everyone out there who says, oh, well, they signed the contract. Stupid. Okay. That's such a morally bankrupt argument, intellectually bankrupt as well. Like no nuance to it whatsoever. Not the slightest semblance of thinking a little deeper into the matter. But let's just talk about what he just said there. As far as the contract, like, yeah, he signed the contract. They did everything they agreed to. But what that says is, man, what they agreed to do just ain't that much. It's just not that much. So if they sign the contract, yes, of course they signed the contract, but you're talking about people who who are raking in billions of dollars here, and they're not willing to make sure a guy doesn't have to work a $40,000 a year job to get by while he's competing for their organization. But he signed the contract, so it's all good. If that's how you think, dummy, I know you're going to leave a comment on here. I know you are, because you're a dummy, because that's what dummies do. They leave dumb comments because they're dummies, you know. So I just want to get that off my chest. Dummies.
All right. Well, don't be a dummy and leave some comments at least, you know. And if you disagree with that, go ahead and let them know, because that'll be fun. And yeah, let us know how you feel about Jimmy Flick's retirement in general. If you think the UFC is doing enough, if you agree with some of the comments he made, if you think he'll stay retired, all of that, and anything that we've talked about is open game. Make sure to let us know how you feel about it. Hit that like button, subscribe, bell notification. And until next time, hopefully more fighters, you know, realize what's up.